That's a good question too. I don't know who I was listening to. It was some sports athlete, and they said, in tough times, one thing you just got to do, you just got to keep pushing forward because the tough times never last. So I think understanding the fact that the good times never last for as long as you want, and the bad times don't last as long as you think they do. So, very good question. There's a lot. Just for me personally, I think going through the entrepreneurial kind of story arc, if you will, I think there's been a lot of personal growth for me personally, just being able to understand, the business and, understanding who I am as a person and understanding the type of leader that I am. I think those are all really important things from a business side. I think being able to getting that MVP out, but it doesn't have to be perfect. Understanding the concept, understanding the real intricacies of what an MVP really means. I think that will help a lot of startups, especially when in the beginning phases. I would say probably Alexander the Great. I've been going down. I've been going down on a bit of a rabbit hole. I mean, this has been something I've been interested in over the past few years. Is different generals and how their battle tactics work and their leadership qualities. And one thing about interesting with Alexander the Great, he led with a sense of fearlessness.
Hi, Bobby. How are you?
I'm doing well. Doing well. You?
Thank you very much. Also, thank you very much for coming to our podcast. Tell us about the origin story of Ceres. How did you come up with the idea and what motivated you to start this company?
Sure, it's a bit of a roundabout story, but we started this company as a coffee company. And to kind of give you a little bit of background on me, I come from a data background, quantitative trading to hedge funds to banking to fintech. So this is more or less a coffee company just between a couple of friends, starting it, bringing in green coffee, good coffee beans from Central America, from El Salvador and Costa Rica, bringing it here, roasting it, packaging, and selling it. And during that process, we saw a lot of degradation of the coffee coming from Central America here to Texas. And during that process, coffee's ranked between 0 to 100. So anything above an 80 is your specialty grade coffee. And that's really what we wanted to focus on, is that specialty grade coffee. So if it was an 89 or 90 at the coffee mill, by the time it got to us, it was an 82 to 83. And we wanted to understand why this was happening. Why was there consistent degradation of the coffee? So we talked to our buyers, our distributors, our suppliers, all saying the same thing. The lack of transparency, and it's the other person's problem. So given our tech backgrounds, we decided, well, why don't we solve our own problem? So we made a rough version of our technology and then rode a cargo ship for 6 days from Mexico to Colombia and saw all the points at which coffee can degrade, from the weather to the port congestion to when we arrived in Colombia, there was geopolitical risk with the cartels. There was, Humvees driving around with turrets on top of it. So there's a lot of different things that really could have affected that coffee bean. And that's really what kind of gave us the idea of, well, why don't we start aggregating a lot of these different data sources, because there's so many things that can affect the supply chain. So that's when we decided, well, why don't we turn Ceres Coffee into Ceres Technology?
So, and tell us about more. How did you convert it to Ceres Technology? Because you have a product now which is getting a Nostradamus AI, which also predicts the supply chain predictions. So tell us more about this product and service.
Sure. When we were riding on the cargo ship coming from Mexico to Colombia, we had there was a Romanian crew members, and then we had the Filipino crew members, and they were all asking if we were CIA or drug runners at that time. And it was funny to see that, just two people riding on a cargo ship there. But after speaking to them, we started asking, what is all the different factors that can affect, shipping and just even movement of goods. And there's so many different factors. And learning that process and being at the ports and going through all this, during that journey, how we decided to shift it is, well, all right, well, now that we've kind of have, a solution in place, an idea of a solution that can, solve our own problem. Well, this is a problem that could be solved to many other different businesses from there. So learning all the intricacies, being boots on the ground and understanding that this is a problem that is faced by a lot of different businesses. So we decided, well, why don't we kind of convert this? Why don't we kind of go full steam ahead with Ceres Technology? We have the solution, and why don't we just kind of go for it, start it, and we have the idea of what the solution would be like, and that's kind of where we started our journey into Ceres Technology.
I mean, the recent weeks has shown us that supply chain routes and also all these, especially predictions, are more valuable to all of us. And
Mhm.
what happened in Yemen and Houthis? Did you have with your AI these kinds of predictions earlier than it happened?
Yeah, there's two different ways that we kind of classify these types of things. One is event driven, so being able to see, specific events like Houthis and or the Suez Canal or Panama Canal. So these are event driven types of things which we can pick up. So as things are formulating through news feeds or Twitter feeds, we can be able to pick up some of that chatter. Now, the second way that we kind of classify things is longer term trends. So these are kind of the subtle trends that are underlying the supply chain. So for example, we found for one client that the price of rice in Malaysia was a leading indicator of a delay for shipments coming from that region. And the reason why is, rice is such a big part of the Malaysian economy, which impacts prices, wages, and then ultimately shipments coming from there. So that's kind of how we classify it. So going back to your question with the, a lot of the geopolitical risks that's happening. So we're actually able to kind of catch that chatter as things were able to form. So, before it became like this, kind of this entire thing, we're able to catch some of that chatter. So that's kind of how we classify, how we're able to pick up and detect things at a high predictability rate, is being able to look at all the events, but also take a look at some of these longer term subtle trends within the supply chain that may not be so obvious to businesses.
What makes the Ceres proprietary AI model unique compared to other supply chain analytics tools on the market? And why is it hard to others to replicate this kind of model?
Sure. So there's a couple different ways. I mean, we've had, clients go to consulting companies to help solve this problem. We actually beat the big three consulting shops for a very large pharmaceutical client, and we have a product. We're not a consulting company, so we're able to do that. The other way of doing it, we're competing with Excel spreadsheets and best guesses, and we have a data-driven approach. Now, the third way is mapping your supply chain. So being able to, understand who your suppliers are, and then your suppliers' suppliers, and then your suppliers' suppliers. Now, that's a very intensive process, and typically what that works is with supply chain mapping software is you have to send forms out to your suppliers, they have to fill it out, then they have to send it out to their suppliers, and then that process goes forward. And that becomes really burdensome, especially when you're talking with companies that may have 1,000 suppliers or 10,000 suppliers. So for us, our AI engine is able to do that much faster. We don't require any data. Our system is set up much quicker. It doesn't take months. And really, our AI engine and how we built it is geared towards specifically solving this problem. So we have pre-trained models where companies can come on, uh, train them specifically for their own supply chain in a very easy, quick manner. Much like, how ChatGPT can train your own model and kind of use it to tailor it to your specific needs. So our systems are built to have a company come in, You can train it towards your supply chain, and then we're able to give you a highly accurate forecast. So having all those different data sources coming in and all those pre-trained models and having it set up in a way where you can easily set up, it's quicker, faster, and more efficient.
Um, who are some major customers you have been working with? What types of companies stand to benefit most of your solution?
Any company that has a multinational, multimodal supply chain. So if you're working, for example, with a supplier and that supplier may be in a different country, then it's a good fit. Or if you've got a supplier that's even within your country that may have suppliers that work with other suppliers outside of your country, it's a good fit. So we don't necessarily say if, sometimes you're working with a produce company and their supply chain, especially here in the States, they typically work with farms in California. That's probably not a good fit. But if you have something that's a multinational, multimodal supply chain, it's a good fit. Now, our kind of main focus on the verticals is pharmaceuticals and complex manufacturing. So, pharmaceuticals, of course, we're working with the Fortune 10 pharmaceutical client right now. They're a pharmaceutical distributor, and obviously getting vaccines and drugs, to patients, that's a critical thing. So understanding where the risks are. And how we define complex manufacturing is basically products that are made with many different components, like a laptop. We're working with the Fortune 50 computer manufacturer right now. It could be a car, has all these different parts. So that's kind of how we define complex manufacturing and pharma. Of course, our system can be used with a lot of different verticals, which is great. But that's really kind of, our two go-to market verticals right now.
So, what are the results for the companies? I mean, have you been able to deliver? Um, Give us some examples. For example, if we were your customers, what kind of results should you give for example, the recent supply chain disruptions?
Sure. So I'll give you an example right now. When one of our that Fortune 10 pharma clients, we're able to achieve an 82% predictability 6 months in advance, which is double their PO life cycle. That was a huge breakthrough because they went to three big consulting firms, and the best they could do was 3 weeks in advance. We were able to do 24 weeks in advance, giving you a signal of a potential delay or disruption, which is 8x better than the nearest company that could do something similar.
Did this customer act on your results?
Yes, they did. Yes, they did. So there's really three. We're seeing three really main uses of our system and data. One is from a procurement standpoint. So really, the value of our system is being able to have procurement teams understand which products and suppliers are at risk. So our system is able to tell you the risk of each product and supplier. It's able to tell you the reason behind that risk, exactly which data sets, like for example, is it the price of rice? Is it the conflict with the Houthis, with all these different things? And we'll also tell you the delay severity. So if there is a delay, a predicted delay, is it going to be delayed by 1 to 6 weeks, 6 to 12 weeks, so on and so forth. So what you can do with that data is being able, from a procurement standpoint, understand, all right, if I know which of my suppliers are more at risk, I can shift POs to a different supplier, or maybe I know that I'm going to a different supplier that's even more expensive, but I know that they will for sure be able to deliver on the product. So from a procurement planning standpoint, that's one of the cases. Another one is inventory management, being able to understand the lead times, especially when it goes into safety stock. And if you're better able to forecast those lead times, you can better manage that safety stock, increases cash to go to other parts of the business. And then finally, from a demand planning standpoint. So if you're predicting a 10% increase in demand, you still have to fulfill that demand. So being able to create some resiliency along on the supply side to meet the demand side.
I mean, being a young startup, what have been the biggest challenges that you face, especially bringing a new product into the market? what were the difficulties when you have go to market?
Yeah, I would say one of the things, especially when you're dealing with, large client base, especially when you're dealing with the Fortune 500, Fortune 2000. One is not having the brand recognition. So, of course, if going with the top three consulting firm, it's a safe bet, right? Even, it's a safe bet to go into there. But fortunately for us, this executive at this Fortune 500, he said, something is telling me that you guys will be able to figure it out. So he was able to take that risk on us, and I'm glad he did because it ended up working out really, really well for everybody involved. So one is kind of that brand recognition of why us versus going to, a McKinsey or a BCG or maybe, another player that's much more larger and established. That may not do exactly what you guys do, but at least they have the brand name. So I think that was one. The second was understanding the internal dynamics and budgeting process of how these Fortune 500s and 1000s thinks, and being able to understand the stakeholders involved and really narrowing down your target market and really understanding who the check writers are. So it's much different than dealing with small to medium sized businesses where you can set up one demo and they'll be able to say yes or no, and they'll be able to sign up. With enterprises, it's can be a 6 to 12 month sales cycle. So you have to understand that level of intricacy within those types of large scale enterprises.
How will you maintain your competitive edge in the market? Because AI is completely getting all the markets, not only verticals and also lots of sectors. And what will be your competitive edge regarding to not being copied?
Yeah, that's a good question. So there's a couple things. I know with the whole Chat GPT thing, that's becoming a huge deal. One thing with Chat GPT, and it hasn't gone there yet, eventually it will. It's a really good co-pilot. Being able to understand the data and being able to give you levels of kind of fluency in simple language to be able to understand, like being able to type in, can you give me a summary of this data? It does a really good job of that. Now, our system isn't necessarily that, it's a decision-making process. So it's, helping with the decision-making of the business. So, that's kind of where we see the AI intelligence, the decision-making intelligence. Now, we're actually incorporating some large language models, trying to create a Ceres Copilot to help you during that process. But that's kind of where we see with the whole Chat GPT and with decision making AIs. Now, for us to continue to stay within the market, we are ahead of the market, but we've got a lot more value add features that we're going to continue to build. Of course, we're filed a patent for our proprietary AI as well. So kind of building the mode of building our own neural networks and all these different things, but also we've got a lot more ideas on how to add value and generate value for clients that we've got coming up in the pipeline over the next 12 to 24 months.
If you could go back 3 years earlier, what advice would you give yourself?
Very good question. There's a lot. Just for me personally, I think going through the entrepreneurial kind of story arc, if you will, I think there's been a lot of personal growth for me personally, just being able to understand, the business and, understanding who I am as a person and understanding the type of leader that I am. I think those are all really important things to understand early on. So I think that's probably one of the advices is just that personal growth and understanding, taking the time to understand, your weaknesses, your strengths, and all these different things. That's just from a personal side. From a business side, I think being able to getting that MVP out. It doesn't have to be perfect. Understanding the concept, understanding the real intricacies of what an MVP really means. I think that will help a lot of startups, especially when in the beginning phases, and just generate enough value where someone will get you to write a check. So I think that's probably one of the biggest values. But I think from a personal side, I think it's been an interesting growth experience just from a personal standpoint. That I would say, someone, for myself 3 years ago is just to embrace that.
Let's deep delve about the MVP thing. Tell me more. What
Yeah.
happened with the MVP? Did you be? I mean, did you launch your MVP very late, or what was the problem?
I think it's just more of an iterative process. So yes, it's getting clients involved in the process quicker, and you'd be surprised, especially your early customers, and they understand that it's not going to work completely. So you don't have to be afraid of getting a product out there that doesn't work. Your early customers know that, and if you're upfront with them in the beginning, hey, this is in beta, and sometimes you built a good. Typically, your first customers are typically people you have a good relationship with, or someone that understands this. They just want to be kind of at the forefront. So if you're upfront with them, things are going to break, but that's fine. And they'll give you the best feedback possible because it's very honest. And hey, this didn't work. So you're constantly tweaking it, or hey, actually, this would make my life easier if you made this better or changed this thing. So I think that's probably from our perspective is don't be afraid to put something out into the market. Especially even if you don't think it's 100% complete, you'll get that feedback and you'll continue to iterate and it'll make it better and better and better.
From your past experience, what was your three failures that you have seen if you look back to the history?
Good question. I'll give you a personal one. I think I've gotten better at delegating, being able to delegate work better because I tend to take on a lot of work myself. But I think if there are other people that can do it better, I think that's just from a personal growth standpoint, as myself as being able to delegate better. Second, I would say, the learning experience from that MVP. I think that was also another good learning experience to understand the clients and being able to pivot when we need to. I think that's probably another thing, is to understand what the client wants. And of course, like we're all going to do small pivots. Like the vision stays the same, but how you get there is always things you have to be flexible on and pivot on. So being able to pivot, all right, we tried this little tactic here, it didn't work out. Understanding when to know to uh, cut your losses and move on, or being able to kind of continue on down that route. So I would say that's probably another learning experience, is how to pivot when you need to. That was another personal experience. And the third one, I would say a third one is personnel. I think another difficult thing is understanding to hire the right people. And even if someone has the right skill set, but they don't have the personality of a startup, it just takes a different mentality when you come to a startup. For example, I'll give you kind of an example just on a sales side and maybe even on an engineering front. But if you worked at an Oracle or SAP, you understand the sales cycle, the enterprise level of sales cycle. But coming to a startup, you have to have a different type of mentality, is grinding it out every day. It's not going to be a set process. You have to define what those processes are. So you have to have a level of mentality between startup scrappiness and understanding, the enterprise side. So that was kind of one thing, is understanding the blend between there. And even from an engineering standpoint, someone may have the right skill set, but coming into a startup, you've got to iterate fast and you got to move fast and you got to understand customer feedback. Just because you think something is right, but the customer is telling you something is different, you have to understand and learn with that feedback. And I think understanding, just for us and just for me in particular, is you kind of just because someone has a great resume and a great skill set doesn't necessarily translate well into a startup. It just takes a specific type of mindset. So when they say that it has to be a culture fit, I think that is something that I've had to experience firsthand, is to understand, yes, the culture fit of a startup has to be there.
How do you motivate yourself in tough times?
That's a good question too. I think in good times, or so in bad times, yeah, I think I don't know who I was listening to. It was some sports athlete, and they said, in tough times, one thing you just got to do, you just got to keep pushing forward because the tough times never last. So I think understanding the fact that the good times never last for as long as you want, and the bad times don't last as long as you think they do. So understanding that, just being kind of on an even keel basis, I think understanding, hey, it's a bad time, it's probably going to suck over the next few weeks, but we'll eventually get through it, and it'll eventually get back to good good times. So I think understanding that just from an even keel standpoint, but also I think focusing on the good things that you are doing is also another good motivating factor. Is like, yes, these particular things suck, but if you focus on the better things and the good things that you're doing, I think that also helps you to get through some of these tough times.
How did you meet with your co-founder, Trey, and decide work together?
I met him about 8 years ago. Met through a mutual friend in Dallas, and yeah, we just worked on a few projects together, did some work together, and we just have a very good complementary skill set. And I think that's another thing that I've realized just going through this startup experience, when people say it's good for founders to have worked together in the past, because you kind of understand, for example, because Trey and I worked with each other in the past, we have complementary skill sets, and we learned that we have complementary skill sets. So I get to focus on what I'm good at, he gets to focus on what he's good at, so we've got a good working relationship. And we've gone through tough times together, so we understand how each other work during those tough times. And even at the beginning of starting Ceres, even though we had worked together, we actually went to a corporate counselor and sat down with him and talked through, just before starting the business, we kind of just went through that corporate counseling process. And I think that was a really good, solid foundation going forward. And I think having that really is good, because if you've never worked with a person you're founding a company with, especially your friends, it can get kind of dicey. Not to say that it can't work. It's just a bit different when you haven't worked with someone, you don't understand how they react under stress. I think that's another big indicator, is things will go bad, but if you can trust each other to how each other focuses under stress, or how they react under stress, because some people tend to lose it under stress and it's not good, but you understand how each other works. So I think going through those stress periods is another a good thing for founders to have gone through.
Do you believe in work-life balance? How do you balance this equation?
I think it's a moving target. I think the work-life balance is just, it's not static. It's not saying, well, 80-20 or 70-30. I think it kind of ebbs and flows. Sometimes it has to be 90-10 to work, to work life, and other times it is 60-40. Or just personally for me, I think I'm always geared towards more work anyway, but I don't think there's like a set percentage of like it has to be 60-40 or 70-30. I think it kind of flows just based on what the needs of the business are, where you're at in the business. Obviously, starting off in the business, it's going to be a lot more, and then other times, it's just I think it's kind of a moving target, and especially when you want to start a family, I think those are all different considerations that you definitely need to have. So I think it's a moving target based on where you're at, what goals of the business are at that current time, what the needs are. Maybe one thing requires your attention more than others, so you kind of have to shift and refocus a little bit.
Do you have mentors or influence? I mean, people that influenced your life and work life and what is the best advice and worst advice that you have given?
Totally. I think, there's been a lot of people that have helped me along the way so far. And yes, I've had mentors, and mentors are different stages. So, um, yeah, I think, um, yeah, what is the best and worst advice? I think one of the, I mean, we can start with the best advice first. I think, um, yeah, I guess it's just more of a simple one, but it actually cuts deep. But I think learning to sell, as a founder and CEO of a business, you're going to need to sell, and it's not just selling in the sense of uh, selling in the sense of, oh, I've got to sell a company to get more revenue. It's, you've got to be able to sell, talent to creating a story. I think that's probably a better way of saying it is understanding the storytelling aspect of, what do you need to craft the story of your business to your employees, to your business partners, to investors, all these different things. So I think that's probably, there was one mentor in mind. I'll give him a shout out. His name is Carl Dorville. So he actually helped me a lot with that process. That's another good one. May have to think about this for a second. But I think I don't necessarily think there's one thing that comes to mind. I think when it comes to advice, it's just, you just have to take everything with a grain of salt. And I've been given advice. I don't think it is necessarily worse advice on like how to run the particular business, or you should do this, you should do that. Oftentimes people come from their own experiences and then try to tell you an advice based on their experience. And it could be applicable to, let's say, for what we're doing or what some other founder is doing. But oftentimes, coming from your experience to shift it to something that's different, you just have to take advice with a grain of salt. You just have to understand what your unique situation is, because every business has a unique situation. We may be all like in startups or in a particular sector, but every business has a unique challenge and a unique experience. So I think understanding, that they're giving you their advice from their experience doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to work for you. So I think you kind of have to learn to sift through that. I think that was another learning process. And I can't think off the top of my head what was the worst advice, but I've tried to implement a couple of different things that advisors or things have given me, and it just didn't work out because we're just in a completely different situation in a different business. So,
What are your favorite podcasts, blogs, or books that changed your life?
I think a recent book was Zero to One. I think that was a good book. That's for startup. I think another good book was 48 Laws of Power. I think that's a good book. I think it's a bit draconian, the 48 Laws of Power. I think it's a bit too, it just foregoes the people aspect a little too much, but I think it was a good book nonetheless. Podcast, Lex Friedman. I actually like Lex Friedman a lot. Um, uh, he has some really good, interesting stuff. I think the PBD podcast, when it comes to business, I actually like that podcast, or that uh, aspect of it. Um, yeah, and then I typically just they're just more or less like I like YouTube a lot, so I'll learn things. So just learn things, but I think those are probably the only two ones that I probably listen to on a regular basis. Other ones are just kind of here and there. So yeah, I know there's a couple ones, but those are the two that come to top of mind right now.
If you could have a dinner with a historical figure, who would it be?
Good question. Dead or alive, or does it matter?
Dead or alive?
Okay, I would say probably Alexander the Great. I've been going down. I've been going down on a bit of a rabbit hole. I mean, this has been something I've been interested in over the past few years. Is different generals and how their battle tactics work and their leadership qualities. And one thing about interesting with Alexander the Great, he led with a sense of fearlessness, and he had really good innovative tactics on the battlefield. At that time, it wasn't seen. So I think one of the best stories that, probably what I would choose him over maybe another general is he was trying to attack this island, and he was on a beach. And what he decided is he decided to build a bridge over a few months from the beach to the island, with arrows being sent over from the island to the bridge, but they built kind of a cover over it. So that sense of fearlessness of I'm just going to get to my objective it's actually that was one of the cooler stories. So I'd probably say Alexander the Great.
What superpower would you like to have if you could have been the Marvel characters?
I don't know if a Marvel character has this, but I think reading people's minds. I think maybe not Marvel character. I don't know if they are a Marvel character or not, but Professor Xavier
Right,
from.
right.
So I think that would be a cool. I think it would be a cool one to have. So I think it's a very powerful superpower.
Bobby, thank you very much for the conversation today. I enjoyed a lot.
Of course, thank you, appreciate it. It was fun.